Hi there, and thank you for joining us on this breaking news edition of In Time. We are here to tell you that as of, I think, about a little more than an hour ago, the United States blocked Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif from entering the United States. This is important because he is their top diplomat, he is their chief negotiator, and was here to speak at the United Nations. The U.S., as the host of the United Nations, is not allowed to bar diplomats from entering this country who are under diplomatic immunity and who have been invited and are regularly allowed to speak at the UN. So what we have at this moment is that, and it appears to have come directly from Donald Trump, who I believe he blocked the passport. He blocked it from the.
He blocked the visa. Yes. Pompeo okayed the visa. He granted the visa, and Trump blocked it. The other thing is that they were talking about blocking this visa ahead of time, and United Nations officials told them that this would be a violation of international law. They told them they were not allowed to do this.
It is a violation to the best of my understanding. It is a violation of at least one treaty we have, and it is a violation of the founding charter of the United Nations, which states that the nation that is hosting the UN may not block other diplomats from attending the UN. Obviously, if the hosting nation is permitted to block diplomats, the UN is done. I am not kidding. That is a game changer. There is no point in having a United Nations if one country can block another country from attending in this manner. That's why the host country was so important. That's why when it was set up as the United States and in New York, that parcel of land actually belongs to the United Nations. It's not even U.S. soil anymore. Technically, it's not quite its own country, if I understand correctly. It's its own, almost like a territory. It is um, a parcel of land over which the UN is sovereign, not the United States. And they may have anyone on that territory that they like. That person really has to travel through the US by nature of the fact that that's where the UN is. But we are barred from blocking anyone or denying anyone entry into the UN. And what we have now done, to the best of my knowledge, has never been done in the over 50-year history of the UN. We are blocking another country from being allowed to speak ostensibly exclusively for political reasons. And I believe we have a super chat. If you want to take that, I don't
Yes.
know what it is, but I think we,
Michael
yes.
Westby for $10 says, I keep hearing conflicting stories regarding the general's reasoning for being at that airport. One, he was there to further peace. Two, he was there to plan more attacks. The general that was killed, we don't really. Here's the thing: we don't know. Trump says he has evidence he was planning attacks. The prime minister of Iraq claims that he was there on a peace mission, which Trump arranged through him, through the prime minister of Iraq, that the prime minister of Iraq on Trump's behalf called Iran and said, basically arranged for a talk, and that's why Soleimani was there. That is so all we know are basically two foreign leaders are saying two different things. So there's nothing conclusive there.
Uh,
This one, however, seems to be verified on all
this,
sides.
yeah. To quickly go back to that because it is important, but yeah, it's rather telling. I don't know about you. I suspect you're of the same mind as I am.
Mhm.
We should almost do a poll on the live chat, but I'm more inclined to believe the president of Iraq than I am our own president on that one.
Yeah, I am too, especially when he's already threatened other crimes, and when Pompeo gave him the out, doubled down.
Yeah. So in case you've been under a rock, wow, that was really not intended for the last however long.
But I'm
We discussed this
accident.
earlier. Yeah, we discussed this earlier. President Donald Trump has said that the United States would attack 52 cultural targets, which are
Hmm.
civilian targets in Iran and or Iraq. Was it? I forget which one. Jesus,
It
he's
was
burning
Iran.
so many
He
people.
was
In
going,
Iran,
yeah.
um, if they retaliate against us, or was it even just? I have no idea
It
the
was
threats
if
anymore. That's a
they
war crime.
any sort of retaliation whatsoever, they already had 52 cultural and historical sites targeted that would be destroyed decisively and swiftly or something like that. It was something very Trumpian. And he said that specifically it would be in memory of the same number of what do you call it,
Hostages.
hostages that were taken 40 years ago in what conflict was that?
It was when the Iranians revolted and they took hostages at the U.S. embassy,
Right.
and that was a number of major clusterfucks. But there was 52 hostages, and ostensibly he is retaliating against Iran for taking the hostages, despite the fact that we had some significant culpability in that issue. But my guess is he will get to it after he punishes Canada for burning down the White House 100 years ago, which didn't happen either. Now, nine ball, $10. All this is nonsense, and Trumpy still has the backing of many of the GOP. I'm curious to see if that fades after this. This is really an astonishingly big deal. So this violates, to the best of my knowledge, two separate treaties. The first is, it's not a treaty, but it was it's the UN Charter which we signed, and I'm trying to look up. It's a very specific part of it that says that as the host country, we cannot use our power as the host country to keep other diplomats out of the UN, which is what we have now, as of a little less than 2 hours ago, done today. Um, and then it also violates, I believe, another treaty we have, a convention I don't recall. This is still very fresh, and we decided to bring it to you as soon as possible. I would like to reiterate, there are a number of reasons. As I was saying earlier, the UN cannot function if one country is allowed to block the diplomats from speaking from another country. All sides need to speak. That is the whole point of the UN, is to try to de-escalate wars by doing this. Now, the last possible time that this might have even, I don't think it would have even occurred then, but the last possible time that you could almost see defending it was the Cuban Missile Crisis in, I want to say 72,
Hmm.
sorry, 62. But at any rate, at that point, the United States and the Soviet Union were in a massive a Cold War was about to turn into a hot war. We discovered that they were secretly building missiles in Cuba, which had first strike capability. This was the ability to hit us before we could retaliate. This changed the entire nature of the conflict between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, which at the time was basically a stalemate.
Hmm.
If they built those missiles, they had the ability to possibly wipe us out before we could retaliate. Obviously, those missiles could not be permitted under any set of circumstances. However, you couldn't attack the missile sites because they were manned by Soviets. If you attacked the missile sites to destroy them, you would kill Soviets. That would be an act of war, and they would retaliate, probably at the time on East Berlin. If they retaliated on East Berlin, we would retaliate on West Berlin, yada, 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 World War III. So uh, this was a serious problem. They could not be permitted, but they also couldn't be removed. This created, October 1962. So I was right about the year. So that's nice. Oh, great, perfect. October 62. So um, the only way this was diffused was by the UN. Now, the UN at first was very much against us. They were against us because the Soviets were very effective in painting the narrative that we don't have any missiles there, and the U.S. is just doing this to turn the world against us. They're doing this because the U.S. is an evil empire, and we're poor innocent Soviets. Please don't hurt us, man. That was a narrative that they spun, and it worked. It worked beautifully. The rest of the world hated the United States for bringing us to the really the brink of World War III. We were then able to demonstrate what is one of the most famous speeches in front of the UN. Almost all of us have heard it, where we asked the their representative, are you building missiles in Cuba? And we wanted to know before we delivered the evidence so we could get them lying. They knew
Right.
this, and this put them in this put them in a very difficult position, because if they say yes and then we show them lying, they're in trouble. If they say, or sorry, if they say no, they're in trouble. They can't say yes. So, um, okay. Um, if I gotta stop reading the live chat because it distracts me, and then I'm done.
No, 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 go ahead.
Um,
I'm watching the live chat. It's cool.
Perfect, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just gonna close it because it distracts me. I'm not good at multitasking like that. So the we asked them that question. It was a loaded question because we wanted to see how they'd answer, and we put them in an awkward position. They lied and said, "Oh no, they didn't say anything." They said, "We're not going to answer." So tell you what, you know what? If you're going to make these accusations, you talk. You can wait forever till your answer. And our reply was, "We're willing to wait until hell freezes over for our answer." Um, Now that was that was salty language for the UN, especially at the time, and we were able to demonstrate that they did in fact have nuclear weapons in Cuba, that they were building these weapons, and that they would be launch ready within about 2 weeks with a crash program. And we were able to eventually de-escalate this. This was done actually not as much through the UN as through back channels, but the UN provided a massive amount of power for both sides at different times. And this was possible only because there was a dialogue that was capable by allowing people to come to the UN and talk. At no time on the brink of World War III did we say that Russia's top diplomat could not come into this country. At no time did we expel them. At no time would we even be empowered to. I don't even think it crossed anybody's mind. The prime minister, not the, I'm sorry, it's not the prime minister, foreign minister, the most powerful diplomat in Iran, who has been invited to speak at the UN, who has a scheduled event on the 9th, that's Thursday, I believe. Yes, Thursday, has a scheduled event, and the UN knows they're coming, has no reason that anybody could block him legitimately, has been barred by the President of the United States from entering this country and going to the UN in violation of, I think, one treaty, and certainly the UN's charter, of which we are a rather important signatory. I think
Just a
that
little
gets
bit.
everyone up to date. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, apparently they thought about doing something like this back in September. I got linked this article by an intrigued feline, one of our mods. And apparently, yes, back in September, they didn't actually end up barring Iran, but they got very close to barring Iran from these from the UN. So they've already flirted with doing this once, and they kind of did it and then pulled back and eventually let them in. This time, though, that's not happening. They're just nope, not letting them in. Um, and let's see, this was a Security Council, UN Security Council. And he was expected, of course, to condemn the actions of the United States, which actually, not only are we talking about legal trouble for the United States, but now this looks really bad. You know, here comes a foreign dignitary to come and basically plead their case why what we did is wrong, and we won't even let them speak. It makes us look guilty as hell.
Makes us look like the evil empire. We
Yes.
are. I mean, we're stifling free speech essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you know the Constitution well enough to understand why that's not really true. But for the cultural meaning of this,
For
you know,
the
we're
principle of
violating our
free
values.
speech. Yes, we're violating our values. Quiesa, 10,000 won. Is there no way in the US to stop this kind of travesty? Courts, House, Senate, nothing. The administration can just do this without blowback or resistance?
Well, I think it would take a while. The president is the head of the executive branch. That means that actually he has control of enforcing the law. So if he says that letting this person in is in violation of whatever law or policy, he is permitted to do that. There is, of course, checks and balances. That takes a while. Um,
And that veto power he can do a lot with. That's another problem.
oh, there's a million. Well, this wouldn't be subject to veto power per se unless Congress
Right.
passed a law saying that the guy could enter, and then he could veto that. But this is staggering, and I'm not sure why this hasn't been picked up by a lot of other news organizations yet. Um, it's a big deal. I mean, you called me up. I was like, Nick, I got some news. I was like, oh, there's always news, Ansgar. What's the deal? You told me this. I was like, okay, we're going live like
Yeah.
10 minutes ago.
Titan Uranus actually asked, do we know exactly whose order this was on? This was Trump. Pompeo granted the visa. Trump, retracted it. Is essentially what happened.
Which he is empowered to do. Actually,
Mhm.
anybody in the executive branch is empowered to allow or remove visas. The creation of international laws and treaties falls under the jurisdiction of
Right.
the
Now
yeah. So he
he can
and the
do it
enforcement of it.
as far as he can bar someone from our country. But he can't bar someone from the UN. So while he is
Correct.
not in violation of US law, he is in violation of the UN Charter. That's the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the most important. I mean, there's a reason that's in the charter, and there's a reason. Let me try to find that number again.
And
But
he has just given the United Nations the perfect victim narrative.
yeah.
I'm not the
Oh my
United
God.
Nations, the Iran. He
Iranians,
has given
Iranians, the big country won't allow us into there. And if you don't think the Middle East was already unified,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
no, you got it on. That's a really great point. I hadn't even thought of that. But I was thinking of the victim narrative at the UN, but across the Middle East,
Yes.
their their points. You know what? Iran's points are so good that that the United States would be destroyed if Iran was allowed to say them. So we can't let them talk.
Would
That's how
you
good his. That's the.
look how
Oh
much they
God.
fear what we have to say? Would you like to hear what the foreign minister had to say on Twitter about this?
Please.
So I screen captured his tweet here. And he says, denying me a visa in violation of 1947 UN headquarters agreement pales in comparison to Pompeo's threat to starve Iranians, in parentheses, war, crimes against humanity, Trump's bluster about cultural heritage, parentheses, war crime. Then he has hashtag economic terrorism, and then cowardly assassination.
Oh
Uh,
God. Well, to tell you the
yeah,
truth,
but
that's.
what
I'm
are
sorry. You go.
but
Yeah.
what are they really afraid of? Truth? And when you block him from even being able to speak, how do you deny it?
And this is well done because what he's saying here is, I'm not really the victim.
Right.
Which he happens to have a point in this regard. I mean, all he's been done is denied. Well, his country's now been denied a voice. But yeah, okay, we blocked him. They'll probably be able to find a replacement. All they need is someone who's already at the UN who could do it, and there are plenty of people there. But um, that's the other thing, which is we can't even stop them if we wanted to, because there are people at the UN who represent Iran, and they have friends who are there who would speak on his behalf. Heck, they might even just put him on speakerphone. I mean, there's any number of ways to do it. So this doesn't help. What this
No.
does do is make us seem if he's speaking through what I would do, if I were him, I'd call a staffer who's there. I'd say, you're going to get an iPhone, you're going to hold it up and put it on speaker and let me talk that way. And while it's going to seem laughable, it's actually going to be really potent that
Yeah.
he can't speak for himself. And this is because what the US has done.
Right. I love the way and this is brilliant the way he finishes the tweet. What are they really afraid of? The truth. Question mark. So it's not even an accusation. It makes it sound like he's just questioning, but it's absolutely an accusation, and one that we have played into.
Well, and notice as well, yeah, somebody said earlier about Trump's foreign policy, and there's a complete lack of foreign policy. There's a lack of understanding of where we're going to go next. It's just reactionary. It's all bad reactions because he doesn't have a plan. He doesn't know what he's doing. He can't think things through, and he's got no nuance. This is the perfect example of that. And the reality is, we don't. Uh, he doesn't even have to do. It's just like, oh, poor me. I'm not even allowed in, but let's think about all the war crimes he's been threatening. And he's, I'm sorry to say, got a valid point. I really, I don't like siding with the Nazi when he's getting beat up for no reason. I don't like siding with the Iranian, but I'm
No!
sorry.
They're a brutal regime that murders homosexuals and does horrible things. Don't make me side with Iran. Oh
Is
my
there a
god.
helipad at the UN building? Yes, there is. I think that yes, there is. I'm like 90% sure there is.
Yeah.
But two problems with that. First of all, how does he get to a helicopter? A helicopter can't cross the ocean. They would have to. A helicopter can't go more than 12 miles. 12 miles is what is recognized internationally as international waters. We recognize 250. So if you get him onto a boat, 250 miles out,
But
and
then he
250
would
is
still need
within
a
the operating range.
visa to enter US airspace.
I did forget that. Yeah, because if
Yeah.
he doesn't have that, he's gonna get shot down. And I
Yeah,
think
just
this,
a little bit.
but I really do like how Tony was. Wait, that was Tony? Oh, that was a terrible idea. Tony really doesn't know. Oh, God, Tony, they're gonna get shot down. They don't know. What are you talking about? I really hate it when Tony comes up with these helipad. It's actually not a bad. Actually,
Um,
Tony, just FYI, real quick, I was thinking the Berlin airlift. I was sitting there going, yeah, they can just have him parachute it or something like that.
just
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 to
Halo
airdrop him.
drop him.
Oh,
Uh,
Berlin
so
airlift the guy.
I'm curious. Okay, two things real quick. One was a comment from Quessa, who said it does ring a tone of irony, in all that axis of evil thingy. But an intrigued feline asks, and maybe you can answer this better than I can. Well, says I don't know if this is true, but this is what has been said. The U.S. should be careful. They're now violating the principles. If they continue, they could trigger Article 6 of the Charter. What is Article 6, and could we end up triggering it this way?
Um, I haven't a clue what Article 6 is. So I don't know the answer to the first one. Second, I can look it up. It sounds vaguely familiar, so I'll try to refresh myself. Before I do that, though, too, the other one is Theo. I said all five World War II victor empires. Interesting language choice. I'm not saying I disagree, but that's an interesting choice of language. Have veto power in the UN, making it useless. No, it's not useless, but that does pull a lot of it because every major country, we if
I've
we
got it
don't
pulled
veto
up, by the
something,
way.
Russia will. If they, anybody who
Yeah.
doesn't. So it does. the UN loses 80% of its power because of that. That 20% has accomplished some significant good. It hasn't been as much as you would hope. It hasn't been, but the UN has been a force for peace. The UN was actually very helpful in overturning apartheid in South Africa. I think a lot of South Africans may disagree with that assessment. Now, that's not to say that the UN fails dramatically because of that veto loophole. That's a huge problem. But
Okay, two things. Let me address someone in the chat here who looks like may have disappeared actually. No. End Flatter says this is not staggering. This is the United States, and I don't care how much you dislike Trump. If you idiots side with Iran, with you are, maybe you would be happier living there. Right. Well, first of all, wanting my country to live up to its principles doesn't mean that I want to live in Iran or I think Iran is good. Just because I think Iran is legally in the right on this issue doesn't mean that Iran is a better place than America. You are committing sort of a black and white fallacy, really. Or, as a friend pointed out, I can point out that poking a hornet's nest is a dumb idea without wanting to hug the hornets. The next little part about there is it has nothing to do with me disliking Trump. Um, my favorite president ever, whoever that might be, so far there hasn't been a president that I've truly loved, could do the same thing, and I would say it's fucking stupid because it's made us into a fool on the world stage. It's turned us into the bad guys, and it's given Iran actually all the tools it needs to come out on top of this scenario. And I do not want Iran on top. I actually liked Iran where it was, stuck under an agreement that kept it from developing a nuclear fucking weapon. Because as the moment they get a nuclear weapon, it's not that they will use it. It gives them incredible bargaining power on the world stage to get what they want. And what they
and
want,
they know it. That's why they want it.
yes, exactly. And what they want is not good for human rights. It's not good for secular humanism. It's not good for anything that we hold dear. The last thing we want is them to get a nuclear weapon, and we have given them every reason to get a nuclear weapon now.
And I'd like to add a couple of things to that. We can't stop them from getting a nuclear weapon, short of going in and murdering all of them. And if you're for that, okay, fine, but then come out and say you're for it. If you're not for that, we can't stop them without doing that. And the way I know that is two words: North Korea. We have completely isolated them. They have no friends, and they're still building one and will successfully build one. We
Mm-hmm.
can't stop them short of murdering them. It's not going to happen. So, either we make a deal with them or we slow them down until they get one, then they've got one, then we've got a problem. And the thing is, unfortunately, many of them are of a religion that says if they die furthering that religion, in particular by maybe wiping Israel off the face of the planet, they get to go straight to heaven. So even if Israel can retaliate because an ally of them maybe gave them nuclear weapons, even if that happens, they get to go to heaven. So that's not as much of a deterrent as you may think. So I think them getting a nuclear weapon is a really, really bad idea because they are more inclined than most other countries to actually use it. Doesn't mean they will, but they are more inclined than most. And if they get one, the chances of a nuclear weapon going off somewhere in the Middle East goes up dramatically. The chances of a second nuclear weapon going off in the Middle East goes up dramatically. And depending on where those go off, it could have massive international consequences. It's going to have massive international consequences anyway, but depending on who's allies with whom, it's really quite serious. So I don't want them to get one. And the reality is my country does sometimes do things that's really, really bad. We just do. And in fact, we've supported dictators who we know are killing families,
Yeah.
killing kids. We do it. We're still doing it right now. This isn't an opinion. This is we know this. I can sit there and say, I love my country, but that's a bad thing anyway. And when a really bad country comes up and says, these are bad things, because I have values, I kind of have to agree with them. Doesn't mean I like them, doesn't mean I want to live there. I have to agree with them if I have integrity. So I have to ask when somebody says, why aren't you American enough? Why don't you have enough integrity? Why don't you love this country enough to be able to admit when it's wrong? Why aren't you secure enough to admit when it's wrong? Only people who have no sense of self-security, no confidence, sit there and say, I never make a mistake. I'm perfect.
Oh, I'm getting from Misha Griffith, by the way,
Yeah,
who I would definitely call a reliable source. Iran,
yes.
Russia, and China have just signed an agreement to hold joint military exercises.
Now, we had heard about that yesterday. That's okay. Ansgar and I are
Great.
going to leave now. Ansgar and I have to go. We have a prior commitment. We have to start a breaking news show on another piece of breaking news. How many times in the last 3 days have we been running a breaking news thing
Seriously.
and had another one? Now, I heard that there was a rumor that that was going to happen.
Uh-huh.
Um, okay, so yeah, now, and one of the reasons that was another reason I was concerned was because Russia and China are both allies with Iran.
Right.
And that wasn't a great relationship, but it wasn't a bad one either per se. There were Islamic terrorists were striking inside Russia. That was causing problems. It wasn't Iran's fault, but Iran wasn't putting the kibosh
Yeah.
on it as much as they want. There were tensions. Guess what? Tensions gone. Why?
Right. Us.
Uh,
We
yeah.
united
So
Iraq and Iran. How did we
I
manage
know,
to
I
do
know. For
that?
3,000 years, nobody's been able to do that.
God. Okay, so by the way, here's Article 6. Since we got a question about that, then I think for
Yes,
the new
please.
people, we should wrap up, not wrap up. We should go back over what's happened for people just
Perfect.
joining
And
us.
I'm curious about Article 6. I've read it, but please.
Okay, a member of the United Nations who has persistently violated the principles contained in the present charter may be expelled from the organization by the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council.
One, my suspicion is that a veto power would hold on that Security Council. It's a recommendation versus resolution. A resolution we can veto. I don't know if we can veto a a recommendation, but if we can, since we have permanent veto power on the Security Council, that ain't going to happen. Even if it
Yeah.
did happen, most of the countries, we have enough juice still, barely, with the
Yeah.
rest of the world, that they would just out of respect for us probably go against it. And third, we're actually, I forget what our status is, but it's above member. There are member states, and then there's, as basically one of the founders, I don't know if that applies to us, but that would take somebody who's an expert in. So that's the non-answer to 6 on the UN Charter. This is fun. All right. Well, folks, and I'm unfortunately, because I have a life, I had a life until I was doing breaking news 24/7. Um, oh, by the way, Ansgar, you're now blocked on my phone.
Okay, cool.
So that's where Ansgar is calling. I was just like, oh, this is going to be a pleasant breaking news. No, I'm not picking up. I'm not picking. So
Uh,
to recap, the United States has blocked the top Iranian diplomat from entering the country. Under normal circumstances, if we want to, we can block anybody we want to from entering the country, except for diplomats who are operating members in good standing of the UN. We cannot block them by treaty and by the founding charter of the UN, which we are signatory. The reason is because that would allow whatever country was operating to hold a monopoly on the UN. We don't like Russia. We could just say, oh, Russia, you can't come in and nobody can hear your side of the story. This is a violation of the principles of the UN. It is a violation of the written charter of the UN. It is ostensibly a violation of our own principles, including but not limited to the principle of free speech. And we are denying Iran the ability to give their side of events, which, while I may strongly disagree with, Ansgar has pointed out a great many reasons why denying it is far worse than letting them give it, which, by the way, they'll be able to do anyway. And now they're going to have a megaphone because now everyone really wants to hear what they have to say.
it's true. This Will Streisand effect, whatever they have to say.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
Jesus. And I told you, and I know this wasn't news to you, but I told you like 4 or 5 days ago, I was like, you realize we're going to have like 2 or 3 breaking news segments every day. And we've been conservative. There have been a couple that we could have gone on. Wait, did Trump just threaten war crimes? Yeah, no, we'll pass. We'll wait.
he'll threaten war crimes again. We'll pick it up next time.
We literally did. This isn't a joke, folks. When he said the 52, that's a war crime, and Ansgar's like, "That's a war crime, isn't it, Nick?" I was like, "Yeah, I think so." Are we going to cover it?
By the way, pinned to my Twitter profile, if you follow the if you follow the links in the description, my pinned tweet is a thread that breaks down the reasons why all of these things matter, not just in the short term, but in the long term, why credibility matters, why keeping our end of a bargain matters, even if you don't like that bargain, so to speak. Why if Trump really did use negotiation, or the calling a negotiation under false pretenses as a method to assassinate a foreign dignitary, why that would matter. Just go check out that thread. I think I did a pretty good job of breaking down why all of that matters. So go ahead and check that out, because I think it's pretty relevant to everything that's going on. Because the more credibility we lose, um, the less bargaining power we have. Um, not just in the on the world stage for trying to deliver peace, but on the world stage economically. How do you make a trade negotiation if people can't trust that you will honor that negotiation? So yeah, um, there are significant reasons why all of this actually matters. Is there
And
anything you wanted to wrap up?
there's a couple things I want to hit. So first of
Okay.
all, and Tony brought this up, if we could have the Discord dropped in the live chat, and I think I will hit the Discord after. I'm going to have to go. I got to pick up my kids from the school before it becomes a big crater in the ground because of the. But I'm going to go get my kids, and then I got to do some things. But I'm going to be in the Discord afterwards. So we did have Theo's been saying, dropping a few interesting comments. One of them is, of course, that it's illegal to kill people in other countries. No, it's not. That's called war. It's illegal to assassinate people in other countries, but that's a different thing.
Yes.
And since he is apparently not distinguishing between the two or understanding how the rationale is made, I think that distinction needs to be made before we reach an assessment of whether or not the targeted killing of a person is acceptable or not. And again, I would refer to Yamamoto in World War II. Having said that, tomorrow we will have on Dr. Cy Gart, and we are going to be discussing Christian evangelical support for Trump and whether or not it is within the Christian mindset, or sorry, the Christian belief set to be able to support him. If so, how? Dr. Cy Gart is a wonderful person. I love hanging out with him. I'm looking forward to having him on the show. But I think in some ways this becomes far more appropriate with what's been happening now. I'm thrilled that this is tied to this because I do think that there's been the argument that this is about getting Christian evangelicals on his side. I'm curious to see his take on this, but that will be tomorrow at 2 p.m. So I do hope you guys will be able to join us for that. I think that will be very relevant. So hopefully that will be good. Again, the Discord will be up and running. Anybody who wants to discuss this afterwards. And then let's see. Yeah, now I'm getting distracted by the live chat again. I'm just going to close that out. And I'm going to have to make better practices. The show I think does better when I'm not bifurcating my attention.
Yeah.
So I think for the last time, so that our next broadcast, with luck, will be 2 p.m. tomorrow. It may be 2 a.m. this morning or 4 a.m. this morning when something else really big happens. This doesn't sound like it's a big deal, I know, and I like that we hit the stories that don't sound big. I'm not, the stories that sound big and are all over the news, I'm less impressed with. It's ones like this. We have irrefutably violated the UN Charter. We have violated the founding principles of the UN. And I believe many of the principles that we claim to hold in this country by refusing the UN ambassador and prime minister access to the United Nations, by denying him entry into the US just to go from the airport to the UN. We have denied him that. That's a staggering violation, and I'm going to have to come up with a new word, staggering, because I've used that about 300 times in the last 3 days.
I
I
I
just
would
think
like to
that word
say
is
I
getting
think
played up.
there is one way to salvage all of this. One way.
Uh, Yeah, I would be
One
delighted.
one way. Right now, if Trump stops playing "You can't tell me what to do" and actually retreats from Iraq, what happens is Ayatollah
Mm,
can go back to his people and on state television say, "Look, we won. This is the retaliation that I promised you. We won. We pushed the imperial dogs out of the Middle East. There needs to be no more bloodshed. Everybody gets what they want. Win-win." And Trump can say, "Oh, look, they don't want our help. Iraq doesn't want our help. Fine. Let them keep their hellhole," because that's the kind of language he'll use. Win-win for everybody.
that's really, I like that a lot. That's really good. And that actually does remind me back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and here's why. There's an old saying: you can either do something or take the credit for it. And oftentimes, I've observed that when there's an intractable difference between two sides, if one side's willing to take the credit and the other side's willing to get the actual benefit, and they can split it that way, that's how it gets fixed. The end to the Cuban Missile Crisis, the U.S. got the credit. The U.S. pushed the Russians back. They dismantled their weapons, and everything went back to the status quo. And we did victory laps like there was no tomorrow. But we did do that with an agreement to, in 6 months from that time, dismantle our Jupiter missiles in Turkey, which we did. Now, we said it was because they were old and we were going to replace them. We dismantled them. We never rebuilt them. So a year after the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had degraded our offensive capability, and the Russian capability was the same. They had a significant benefit, and we lost potential first strike capabilities from Turkey in order to curb this. They actually won, but we looked like we did, much more than they did. They were willing to accept that, and we were thrilled to accept that.
Yeah.
That's usually how this works. And what I like about what you just said is that's it. Trump gets to look like he's the winner that way, and he's just boom. Yeah, no, that's usually how these things are worked out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing at the possibility that he's that smart.
Yeah.
I was thinking of what are the possibilities that he's gonna. Oh, that's too. I'm sorry. I'm trying to
Yeah.
run a serious show. I can't.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah.
that it would be the ultimate. I mean, and the thing is this is what he promised to do in when he became president, anyways, is end all the wars in the Middle East. So get out.
Well, he may. He may. A couple more nuclear bomb detonations, and hey, no more wars in the. Like, listen, he did say he would unite Iran and Iraq. He would say, like I said, this is the Kushner problem. I mean, he's
Yeah,
got Kushner. He's in there. He's Israel couldn't be happier. Really, he's. Oh my God, he's. Israel may not be happy about this. Couldn't be happier about the West Bank and the
mm.
moving of the yeah. So he's I keep thinking he's got to be a Christian Zionist. I'm sorry, but it really looks like he's trying to. He's like, I want Jesus to come back, man, and I got to start a war.
It's either that or I think he's just playing to that base. He knows that it riles him up. So,
Yeah,
all right, is
and I
anything
think we had a
before?
few in our live chat.
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we had a few. Well, that one we got like a flood. That one stream. My God. Okay,
Oh,
so
geez.
anything before we wrap up?
No, I think that's about it.
All right. So once again, we blocked Iran's top diplomat from entering the United States, which to block him from entering the United Nations, so that he could speak at a Security Council, where he was expected to condemn the actions of the United States, and yeah, which is in direct violation of the
Well,
United Nations. Hmm.
you want some breaking news?
Sure. Oh,
Why not? We're
good.
about to leave. Hold on. Uh, no, okay. No, it is breaking news, but it's old breaking news.
Okay.
Trump has just come out and reiterated that it will be the official policy of the U.S. not to remove any troops from Iraq, no matter what they say.
Oh, goody.
So, which is also a violation of national sovereignty. That is a war crime and a violation again of what we said. We said we were there to give them freedom. If
Can
freedom
we just
only
have
means
Bush
the
back?
freedom to yeah, if freedom means only the freedom to agree with us, and if you decide you don't want us around anymore, that's not freedom. Anyways, I'm sorry, what were we gonna say?
Can we just have Bush back? At this
I
point, I'll
know.
take Bush back.
I'll take, and they do that with every single one. I wasn't a big fan of the first Bush, and then the second Bush, I was like, I'll take the first Bush back again, but nobody's worse than this. And then that's the one thing I'm impressed. They're always capable of getting a new president that makes me really regret the old one and appreciate the old one so
Up.
much better.
Bregwin makes a great point. We are now officially an occupying force.
Not until the president signs it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Their president, I believe, has not yet signed it, but he does have a timeline. Uh, and yeah, so we're basically an occupying force. We're going to be an occupying force, an illegally occupying force of a democratically elected government. By the
We
way,
created a
uh,
democracy. Then, as a democracy, they said, "Please leave," when we went. Fuck you.
but somebody's going to have to explain to me what is the difference between a dictatorial, imperialistic country, um, if it's not how they behave, because we're behaving like one, but it's been explained to me repeatedly we're not one. But we're violating international law. We're staying in countries where the democratic governments don't want us around and have said get out, where the people have said get out. But we are not and I just don't understand it except, hey, I like us better and we're just the good guys because I'm declaring that. How many bad things do we have to do before that gets to be put on the table?
Quick detail before we close out.
Yeah.
Misha says, and I'm verifying this, that the Iranian representative is saying that his travel to the UN has been planned for weeks. It is
Yeah.
Trump it is the Trump admin that's trying to tie the trip to the assassination of
No,
the general. Yeah,
that is true. His trip was planned several weeks ago, I think at least 3 weeks ago. And this is obviously a lot less than a week old. They just revoked it now because they're pissed at him,
right.
and because of these recent events. But it was
Not
on the schedule. And again, it's illegal. You
petty at
can't block him.
all.
He's been invited.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right, folks, I think that's it, unless there's more breaking news today. And we will, I'm sure, be seeing much more of you in the very near future.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.